What happens when a company builds tomorrow's performance car, just as the world stops wanting performance? Throughout automotive history, timing has often mattered just as much as engineering. Some cars arrive exactly when the market is ready for them and become instant legends. Others appear only a few years too early or too late, disappearing before anyone fully understands what they represent. Few automobiles illustrate that better than the BMW 2002 Turbo. Today, turbocharged engines power everything from compact hatchbacks to luxury sedans and high-performance supercars. They are efficient, reliable, and almost expected. But in the early 1970s, turbocharging belonged almost entirely to the world of motorsport. It was considered complicated, expensive, and far too aggressive for everyday road cars. Most manufacturers weren't willing to take the risk. BMW was. At the time, the company itself was changing. Only a decade earlier, BMW had been fighting for survival, producing small cars while searching for a clear identity. Everything changed with the arrival of the Neue Klasse. Introduced during the 1960s, these modern sports sedans transformed BMW into a company known for engineering, driver involvement, and balanced performance. Among them, one model stood above the rest, the BMW 2002. Lightweight, responsive, and remarkably enjoyable to drive, it quickly became one of the defining sports sedans of its generation. Journalists praised its handling, enthusiasts loved its simplicity, and buyers discovered that practical transportation could also be genuinely exciting. Personally, I think the success of the 2002 gave BMW something even more valuable than strong sales. It gave the company confidence. Engineers were no longer satisfied with building one of the best compact sports sedans in Europe. They wanted to build something the automotive industry had never seen before. Rather than increasing engine displacement or adding more cylinders, BMW turned toward a technology that was still regarded as experimental outside professional racing, turbocharging. Inspired by the company's growing experience in international motorsport, engineers began adapting forced induction for everyday road use. The project centered around the familiar M10 four-cylinder engine, but what emerged was unlike anything buyers expected. The turbocharged engine produced approximately 170 horsepower from just 2 liters of displacement, an astonishing figure for 1973. In a compact car weighing barely over a metric ton, those numbers translated into performance that rivaled far more expensive sports cars. The BMW 2002 Turbo became the first European series production passenger car equipped with a turbocharged engine, marking a milestone not only for BMW but for the entire automotive industry. Its aggressively widened fenders, front air dam, and distinctive mirror-written "Turbo" lettering across the front spoiler made sure nobody would mistake it for an ordinary 2002. Everything about the car announced that BMW was entering a completely new era. It looked like the future. Unfortunately, the future arrived at exactly the wrong moment. The BMW 2002 Turbo made its public debut at the Frankfurt Motor Show in September 1973. On paper, the timing could not have seemed better. The global appetite for performance cars was still strong, motorsport technology fascinated enthusiasts, and BMW was eager to establish itself as a true performance brand rather than simply a manufacturer of well-engineered sedans. The new Turbo embodied that ambition perfectly. It wasn't merely another faster version of the 2002. It was a statement about where BMW believed the future of performance was heading. Yet only weeks after its introduction, events beyond BMW's control changed the automotive world almost overnight. In October 1973, the oil crisis erupted. Fuel prices rose dramatically, governments introduced new restrictions, speed limits became a political issue in several countries, and suddenly powerful performance cars no longer represented progress in the eyes of many people. They became symbols of excess during a period of economic uncertainty. For BMW, the timing could hardly have been worse. The company's most advanced performance car had arrived just as buyers began worrying about fuel consumption rather than horsepower. Personally, I think this is what makes the 2002 Turbo such a fascinating chapter in BMW's history. The engineering wasn't wrong. The market simply changed faster than anyone could have predicted. Had the same car appeared 3 or 4 years earlier, its story might have been completely different. Technically, however, the 2002 Turbo was extraordinary. Beneath the hood sat the familiar M10 inline-four, but it had been extensively reinforced to cope with forced induction. Compression ratio was lowered, stronger internal components were used, and a Kunle, Kopp and Koch, better known as KKK, turbocharger dramatically increased the engine's output. Mechanical fuel injection supplied by Kugelfischer ensured precise fuel delivery, while an oil cooler helped manage the additional heat generated by the turbocharged engine. Every component reflected BMW's determination to prove that turbocharging could work on the road, not just on the racetrack. Driving the car demanded concentration. Like many early turbocharged engines, the power delivery was anything but linear. At lower engine speeds, the 2002 Turbo behaved much like a conventional sports sedan. But once the turbocharger built sufficient boost, the character of the car changed almost instantly. The surge of acceleration arrived with remarkable force, catching many inexperienced drivers by surprise. Today, enthusiasts describe it as classic turbo lag followed by an explosive rush of power. In the early 1970s, very few road cars behaved like that. The experience felt dramatic, unpredictable, and incredibly exciting. Performance figures reflected just how advanced the car really was. Reaching 100 km per hour in around 7 seconds and exceeding 210 km per hour, the 2002 Turbo ranked among the quickest European production cars of its era. Those numbers become even more impressive when you remember that this was a compact two-door sedan powered by only a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. BMW had demonstrated that intelligent engineering could compete with far larger and more powerful engines. Visually, the car looked every bit as aggressive as it performed. Flared wheel arches accommodated wider tires, the deep front spoiler improved stability, and the distinctive graphics made the Turbo impossible to ignore. Perhaps the most controversial feature was the word "turbo" printed in reverse across the front spoiler. The idea was simple: drivers ahead could read it correctly in their rearview mirrors and immediately know what was approaching. It was bold, unconventional, and perfectly suited the confidence BMW wanted to project. Yet critics argued that it encouraged aggressive driving, and in some markets the reversed lettering was quietly removed after negative public reaction. Despite its remarkable engineering, sales never reached BMW's expectations. Production lasted only until 1975, and fewer than 1,700 examples were built. For a company hoping to establish turbocharging as the next chapter of performance motoring, those numbers were disappointing. But sometimes the importance of a car cannot be measured by production totals. Sometimes its true legacy only becomes clear decades later. For many manufacturers, the disappointing sales of the 2002 Turbo might have been enough to abandon turbocharging altogether. After all, the project had required significant engineering investment, arrived at the worst possible economic moment, and sold in very small numbers. But BMW's engineers saw the situation differently. They didn't believe the technology had failed. They believed the timing had. That distinction would shape the company's future for decades. Although the 2002 Turbo disappeared from showrooms after only a short production run, the lessons learned during its development proved invaluable. Engineers gained first-hand experience with forced induction, thermal management, fuel delivery, engine durability, and the unique driving characteristics of turbocharged performance cars. Those lessons would influence future BMW road cars as well as the company's increasingly ambitious motorsport programs. In many ways, the 2002 Turbo became a laboratory on wheels. Personally, I think that's why its importance extends far beyond its production numbers. It wasn't successful because thousands of people bought one. It was successful because it proved BMW was willing to experiment long before the rest of the industry caught up. Decades later, turbocharging would become one of the defining technologies of modern performance engineering. Today, nearly every BMW M model relies on turbocharged power. The idea that once seemed radical in 1973 has become the foundation of the company's high-performance lineup. Looking back, it's remarkable how accurately the 2002 Turbo predicted the future. It simply arrived before the world was ready to embrace it. The car's reputation also changed dramatically with time. During the 1970s, many people viewed it as an expensive curiosity. By the 1990s, enthusiasts had begun recognizing it as a milestone in BMW history. Today, it is considered one of the most collectible and historically significant BMWs ever built. Well-preserved examples command extraordinary prices at auctions, not because they were produced in tiny numbers alone, but because they represent the beginning of an entirely new chapter for the brand. Collectors understand that without the 2002 Turbo, the story of BMW performance would look very different. It also established something that would become central to BMW's identity: the willingness to challenge convention. Instead of following established formulas, BMW repeatedly chose difficult engineering paths that others considered too risky. Whether it was the high-revving naturally aspirated engines of later M cars, the carbon fiber construction of the i8, or the turbocharged performance engines that dominate today's lineup, the company's history is filled with moments where innovation mattered more than playing it safe. The 2002 Turbo was one of the earliest and clearest examples of that philosophy. In the end, the BMW 2002 Turbo wasn't defeated by its engineering. It was defeated by history. The oil crisis, changing public attitudes, and an uncertain global economy prevented it from achieving the commercial success BMW had envisioned. Yet history often has a sense of irony. The very car that seemed like a failure in 1973 is now celebrated as one of the most influential BMWs ever created. It proved that being ahead of your time isn't always rewarded immediately. Sometimes the world needs decades to recognize just how important a truly revolutionary automobile really was.